All right. Welcome, everyone. Glad that you're here. I'm Jesse Spencer-Smith, and I'm Chief Data Scientist and Director of the Data Science Institute at Vanderbilt University. And today we're going to be talking about AI best practices. And we're also going to be talking about ethics. These are personal ethics and security. And this talk really is for students. We're going to have another one actually tomorrow, which is going to be more for faculty. But if you're faculty, you're more than welcome here. And I'm glad that you're here. So in today's 45-minute session, we're going to discuss some of the essential best practices. We're only at 45 minutes, so it's just going to be a few important ones. And we're going to be touching on safety and security as well. We won't be going into all of the uses and applications of generative AI. Watch our videos and our other workshops for that. But I'm hoping that by the end of this short workshop, you'll have additional insight into generative AI models, that you'll be able to make better, safer choices when using them, and that you'll have a greater sense of the personal ethical decisions that you need to make when using them. Now, the ethical considerations around the training and the use of AI runs very deep. And we'll have later workshops delving deeper into this. Here, we're only going to, again, be considering the personal ethics of when and how to use generative AI. So first, some terminology. I'll refer to generative AI, and that covers the broad range of models with differing training and capabilities. So, often when people talk about this, they talk about ChatGPT. It's like the Coke of generative AI. It stands in for everything. But in actuality, ChatGPT is just one of many different models. We have ChatGPT, GPT-4, Bing, Bard, Llama, Codex, CodeLlama. All of these are types of generative AI. So today, we're going to be discussing hallucinations, bias, security, and ownership. When I started to put this together, though, I ran into a problem. So the problem was that I went back to some examples that I had successfully used previously, but they did not perform the same way. I was hoping that I was going to be able to show you really terrible hallucinations. So what are hallucinations? Hallucinations are when the model doesn't know something, but will absolutely just make up stuff for you. So previously, in years past, when I have said, what books has Jesse Spencer-Smith written? Now, the fact is, I've written no books. But it would tell me I had. And often they were books kind of around data science, so it knew something about me. But look at this. Look at what it's saying now. ChatGPT says, Jesse Spencer-Smith is not an author that I'm aware of. My knowledge is up to date only until September 2021. So if he's published anything since then, this is actually a really good answer. So I couldn't get it to hallucinate. All right. So I tried something else. Please list 10 books that Kurt Vonnegut has written. Kurt Vonnegut's written a lot of books. And I was thinking maybe if we could get it to have to tell me a bunch of books that eventually would start getting something wrong there. So let's see how it does here. It starts getting it correct up to a certain point. So, all right, I recognize most of those books. A few of them I had to look up, but actually it turns out that that's actually all okay right there. All right. So I said, well, give me 10 more. Give me 10 more. Okay, now it's getting into like essay collections and things like that. But yeah, these are books that I remember too. All right, now I'm beginning to sweat a little bit because I'm not able to get the model to actually hallucinate anymore. All right, can you give me 10 more? And my gosh, all of these are there. I didn't check all of these, but these all seem to be ones that I remember. So I tried again. Can you give me 10 more? Finally, it stops. But it doesn't hallucinate. Instead, what it says is, I apologize, but I seem to have provided you with a comprehensive list of Kurt Vonnegut's works. Not hallucinating anymore. Well, maybe everything is taken care of. Maybe it doesn't hallucinate anymore, but I tried one more thing. Please give me citations for scientific papers concerning in-context learning in generative AI models. This is a topic that I'm really interested in. All right, so now what does it do? Ooh, it's giving me all sorts of articles. This is fantastic. I even think that I recognize some of these articles. Matter of fact, I do recognize some of these articles, but I don't recognize the names with them. Matter of fact, when I look up the names, I realize, okay, in context impersonation reveals, and the authors are, okay, Salusky. And I realize that what it's doing is it's mixing and matching titles, making up titles, and just assigning different authors to them. And sometimes things like the publication dates are wrong, and the initials of the authors are just wrong, and they didn't appear in these places. So now it's hallucinating. Now the model is giving me information which is not correct. So why did it not do it when it had done it previously, but is still doing it with titles of papers? Well, it actually comes down to how the models work. And as it happens, it's really not doing anything that we didn't train it to do. So here's a very simplified version of a generative AI model. It really is, it's a transformer model. That's the architecture. It's a decoder transformer. And really all that this model is doing is it's taking a prompt and it does some work on it. And there are classes you take, workshops you can take that I'll tell you about at the very end, where you can learn more about this. But really what it's coming up with is a response. It is coming up with a response which is going to be really the prompt plus one more token. So it's generating the next token, and then you run it again, and then it generates sentences. Tokens generally are words, sometimes they're subwords. So it's taking and guessing, essentially, the next word. So it's always, and has been trained to, generate the most likely next word. Remember, it's not actually doing any sort of a lookup. It doesn't have access, in some of these models, has no access to the internet. It's simply taking what it's been trained on and tries to choose the next most likely word. So in fact, when we're asking it to generate a response and give us very specific information, like when I say, please give me all the information about these articles, these are very likely. This is very probable. This is a plausible response, but it doesn't know enough. It gets it generally right. The authors I recognize, but they're not in the right place. The middle initials aren't right. It doesn't know those things, but it's giving me plausible responses just like I asked it to do. So why is it not getting it right? Well, this is where all the information is stored that a model knows. It's in what's called the decoder stack. And everything it knows is stored in what's called the feed-forward network. This is not a database. This is not a lookup. As a matter of fact, the only thing that it is an association, and it's a memory, but it's a memory like we kind of have a memory. It's imprecise. So it's not going to get the fine details. Do you remember the middle initials of all the important authors that you've read? I certainly don't. If you forced me to, I'd be happy to come up with middle initials, but it'd just be a guess. Same thing with the model. It's hallucinating. It's doing what we trained it to do. We're asking it to do the wrong thing. So it turns out that this touches on a soft spot in our own heuristics, our own cognitive makeup. It's touching on a soft spot. So in debate, one tactic to win an argument, especially when you don't have a strong position, is to talk very fast and include lots of details. It doesn't matter if the details are correct or incorrect. If you simply give enough details, people will tend to believe you because they can't argue against you because you're talking so fast and you're giving so much information, they're just going to believe you. So this actually has a name in argumentation and in rhetoric called, sometimes it's called the Gish Gallop, named after Dwayne Gish, a creationist who would spew information so fast, some correct, some not, but it was so fast and so much that you couldn't fact check him. And so you just had to say, well, it sounds right. That's a soft spot. The models present so much information so quickly, we tend to believe it because there's a lot of it. It's not necessarily true. The models work differently than we do. It's perfectly willing to present as much detailed information as you ask it for, but whether or not it's correct has to do with what you're asking. Here, I'm treating the model like Google. It is not Google. The model might be augmented. The model itself might use Google, and then it's more likely to give correct responses because now it can look things up and it's going to mitigate the problem, but not entirely solve it. So there's another weakness in our own cognitive makeup that this sort of jumps up and down on. And that's the illusion of explanatory depth. So we believe that we know a great deal about a topic because we're able to explain up to a certain point until we're asked to explain in greater detail. And that's when we realize that we actually don't have the depth of knowledge that we thought. And with generative AI, we sort of assume that it has a great deal of understanding of a topic because it has the detail. If it's giving us details, it must have a deep representation of what we're asking it. But it's actually, again, not true. It's not that it's an expert in everything. So when can you trust an AI on the details? If you can't trust it all the time, is it just worthless and no good? Well, actually, there are times when you can trust it and tasks you can trust it with, and times you can't. So imagine you have a friend, an imaginary friend, or a real friend. They might suggest that they know of a paper that you need to know about for in-context learning. They can describe it, maybe get part of the title. Would you also ask that friend to just come up off the top of their head, the published date, the name of all the authors, the volume, the page number of the article, the names and the middle initials of all the co-authors? No way. You'd look that up. You would not trust your friend to get that right. Same thing with the AI. Imagine if your friend was sitting in front of a browser. So would you trust them, if they're sitting in front of a browser, to read out or paraphrase the answers and give you the names and the full title of the paper? Sure, they're in front of a browser. Even then, if you needed the exact reference, you'd probably look it up yourself because, maybe your friend's going to get it wrong. So even when your friend is augmented with a browser, when you want to get the actual factual information, you look it up yourself using the traditional tools. The same thing is true with generative AI. If you need it to be exactly correct, you look it up. If you want to get the general ideas, if you want to get in the direction of, if you want to test out ideas, talk to your friend, talk to the generative AI. Don't try to use it like Google. So if the generative AI that you're using can access the internet, like Bing Chat, that mitigates the problem. But it's not going to completely solve it. It still can generate factually incorrect or only approximately correct information. So it mitigates but doesn't solve the problem. Let's go back to our graph here. So the model stores its learning here in the decoder stack. So quick, and you can answer on Slack here. I'm sorry, on Slack, on chat. Where does the training come from to sort of populate all this understanding here in the decoder stack? What do we train on? Anybody have some ideas? Go ahead and put it into chat. And Miranda and Umang, feel free to be a shill and put an answer in there as well. Yeah, previous output from people. That's right. Often stuff on the internet. That's a good way to get lots of text, right? I mean, yes, it's also trained on books. Up until the New York Times actually shut it down, OpenAI was training on stuff from New York Times, but lots of different sources, but also the internet. So let's think about that. That means that its understanding of the world is from the internet. Let's think about what that means. Have you ever run across something on the internet which was incorrect? Have you ever run across something on the internet which was downright offensive, biased? Well, the models are trained on that. All that information is there in the decoder stack, deeply buried into the model. So the models are going to have, they're going to have learned on biased material. And so the models themselves will have bias. I'm going to show you a really good example of this, or rather, I intended on showing you a really good example on this, but it didn't work. So here's what happened. Previously, I was able to ask a good, simple question, such as, describe the day in the life of a woman. And I was just rubbing my hands. So it's like, okay, here we go. We're going to get lots of biased response here. It's important to approach descriptions of individuals based on gender with sensitivity and avoid perpetuating stereotypes. When did it learn this? People's experience vary widely based on their individual choices, roles, and circumstances. And then you go through the routine. It's like morning routine, work responsibilities, personal growth, family relationships. Wow, this is getting very detailed. And it's like, she might participate in community events. Like, this is like a really good person. This is not the response that I got a couple of years ago. All right, still some hope here. Let's ask it about men. All right. Similar to my previous response, it's important to approach descriptions of individuals based on gender with sensitivity and avoid perpetuating stereotypes. And again, the answer is not really too dependent on the fact that you're asking about a man rather than a woman. What happened? Where did the bias go? So here's the thing. There's a way to steer the behavior of models, and so it mitigates the worst behaviors. Because a couple of years ago, if you put this into one of the earlier models, you would have gotten an eyeful. Now, it's not bad. So what happened? What happened was something that's called reinforcement learning on human feedback. So what happens is you train models, you get a response like what you used to get when you used to ask those questions, and it said not preferred. And then what would happen, it would do a reshaping of the entire network. And the idea here is that you have preferred ways of responding. And often these are based on policies that you choose. Whoever is doing the training chooses. You may choose for the model to be helpful. So rather than just spitting out answers, it chats back to you. So that's where chatbots came from. They emphasize using reinforcement learning from human feedback to be conversational. Don't just give the answer, say, yes, I can give you the answer. Thank you for asking. And then give the response. You can also say, please don't be harmful. Avoid stereotyping. And so on the surface, it's not going to be as horrible as it was before, or as we see, it can actually be downright helpful, not harmful. There are any number of ways you can steer models to respond in ways that are preferred. But note, this is not changing the fundamental learning of the decoder stack, this feed-forward network in here. This is deeply ingrained. So I wanted to check to see if I could actually just tease out some bias in here. Let's see if we can tease out some bias. So there's another type of task that we can give it. And this is a task that has to uncover some bias in here. So I'm having an uncertain reference, a pronoun ambiguity. Please complete the following sentence. The carpenter always asked the librarian for help because, and this is where we change it, he or she. So let's start with he. The carpenter always asked the librarian for help because he values the librarian's vast knowledge and finds their insights valuable in his pursuit of various woodworking projects. So the model assumed that he referred to the carpenter. All right, let's put in she. Please complete the following sentence. The carpenter always asked the librarian for help because she possesses a wealth of information about different woodworking techniques and materials. Oh, interesting. You know, when I generated this earlier, it assumed that she was the librarian. Oh, wait a minute. No, this does go. Yes, this does go to the librarian. It did it again.
It did.
It did.
It did.
Excellent. Well, I mean, we just showed that there's still bias in there. But, so, what does this mean? Reinforcement learning from human feedback mitigates. It can reduce the worst harms and make it so it's less harmful, more helpful. That is still there. So it's important to keep that in mind as you use the models, that the bias and the learnings are still there in the model. This is relatively mild, right? Okay, so it thinks a carpenter is more likely male. Okay, a librarian is more likely female. Maybe. It's important to know that it's in there because that also means that the other parts that are more, that have even more weight are still in there as well. So that is something to keep in mind as you work with the models. Okay. Let's talk about when to use the models. When I do a presentation, I use a very rough outline. And then I use just a few key sentences and transitions. And I do this, and so when I'm presenting, it's more natural. It makes me think a little bit more. And, you know, for example, here's a presentation that I'm doing right now that's using generative AI. Here we go. Here's my hidden script for you. When I do a presentation, I use very rough outline. See? Here's a presentation I'm doing right now using generative AI. It's only 45 minutes. I want to highlight the important best practice issues. Am I missing anything important? All right, I'm going to use a generative AI. I'm going to put my entire script in here. And you're looking at my whole script. I'm going to copy the whole thing. I'm going to copy the entire thing. And I'm going to ask Chat GPT, GPT-4 in particular, because it does a better job. And I'm going to put in this as a prompt. When I do a presentation, I use a rough outline. Am I missing anything important? I'm going to copy that in. I'm going to put this into here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the entire thing. Oops, Control Z. I'm going to copy the entire thing. I'm going to give all of that to GPT-4. And I'm going to ask it what it thinks of my presentation that I'm giving to you right now. And I'm hoping I'm not too embarrassed. All right, so it's giving me, I put all that in there. This is the entire presentation as I'm giving it to you. All right, so it says, you've included concrete examples to make your points clear. Here's some points for consideration. Transparency and explanation. You discuss hallucinations, but transparency around how the model arrived at those outputs is equally important for trust. That's okay. It's not a great point because it's a tough thing with generative models. Data provenance, where does the data come from? Accessibility and inclusivity, quality control, evaluation metrics. These aren't bad. They're not quite relevant. And this is talking about older models. Remember, the model stopped training in 2021. It actually doesn't know that much about itself. So not a bad idea. It gave me some good solutions, some good ideas, some suggestions. It gave me a code snippet that I might want to share with you, which is actually not very good at all. So this gave me some ideas of how I should change my presentation for you the next time that I give it. So What do y'all think about the use? Did I ask it to write my presentation? No. Matter of fact, if we go back to our friend, I have a very good friend who's a writer, so I give it to her and I say, what I leave out? Am I violating honor code if I've given it to this person to get feedback? Well, depends on your classes and what's in the syllabus and what your instructor says, but probably not in most cases if it's not spelled out. Getting feedback and using the models is actually a great way to get feedback, especially if you get a persona prompt. And there are other workshops where you can learn about that. Give me feedback on my presentation. Give me an example of tough questions that the people might ask when I do my presentation. All of that is fair game. Well, let's take a step further. What if I asked it to give me an outline of what I might talk about? Well, okay, now we're skirting a little bit closer to the line, right? Here, I need to pull my presentation back over here so you don't get to look at it anymore. But I might say, give me an outline that I might use, that I might work on. That would be, well, you're getting into the area, how much information to get back from it. Now let's step right over the line. Make a presentation on best practices in using AI, touching on hallucination, bias, integrity, intellectual property, targeted primarily to undergraduate students, you all, across disciplines. Make it approachable and fun. Now I've stepped over the line. I'm asking the AI to generate everything for me. At the very least, I have to give it authorship. And actually, the way that it's presenting it, it's generating everything. I may not even be a co-author on this. I wrote the prompt, and it's generating everything else. That's a problem. So that's a choice you probably will not want to make, both for your personal ethics and for honor code. And because, actually, it isn't that great. And it's all right. But again, it's based on older information. Now, that's not always going to be the case. If I'd done a better prompt, if I'd given it a persona, if I'd given it more information, maybe give it some background information, it could have written a really good presentation. I still would not want to use it for ethical reasons unless the whole presentation, or the point of the presentation was, hey, I wrote this with AI, or hey, AI wrote this. But you have to give it credit, and you may not be able to do this at all in your classes. And currently, it's not terrific. So ethical reasons, and because you'd actually want to do a better job than the model would be able to do. So again, how do you sort of reason through this? Think of your friend. It's okay to ask your friend to think through the paper with you, maybe even give you some spitball ideas. That's fine. But when it begins to move into authorship, could you write this part for me? Could you write the full outline and give me examples? Can you just write the entire thing? That's when you start getting into trouble. All right. I'm going to give you another look at my outline here, because we have another temptation which comes in when you're working in Google Docs now. Have you all noticed this yet? Give me a thumbs up if you've noticed this over here, this little blinking thing when you're writing. You click on it, and it says, oh, would you like to have some help changing the tone? Would you like to summarize this? Would you like to bulletize this? Would you like to elaborate? Let's see what it does when you just say elaborate. So this was where, think of a friend. Ask the friend to read. Okay to ask the friend to read through. It says, it's always a good idea to have someone else read through your work and give you feedback. So these tools are not only available to us, they're being handed to us on a silver platter. Remember the ethical considerations of whether something else should be doing writing for you, and it also missed the point. I wasn't actually talking about a friend working with you. I don't need the help of this person. Instead, I was trying to make a point. So again, main concern, ethical considerations. Second point, it's not currently great, but again, it will get better. Even then, you need to consider who's doing the writing. Are you owning enough of it to actually claim authorship? So, any questions in the chat? All right. I'm going to do a new chat here. Oh, Carol, what if, for example, I write a paragraph that's too long and I ask my AI to rewrite it in fewer words? See, that's if your instructor says, you may use AI, will probably give you outlines of what it is, and that may absolutely be acceptable. When you're writing for a paper, for a journal, the journal should outline what is allowable. This is probably going to be an allowable use. Where it steps away from that is when you ask it to expand, because then it's actually writing. On the one hand, it's editing. Would you ask your friend to edit for you and to cut things out? Maybe even reword to make it shorter? Absolutely. Do you have to give your friend authorship because they have reduced and helped edit? No, they were editing. You have your friend expand on a point and write a whole section or rewrite sentences to make them longer, add more detail. Now they are authoring the paper. So this raises another question. If you create something with an AI, is the product yours? Is it copyrightable? And here it comes down to how much you have done. So the US Copyright Office early on took a strong stance on AI-human collaboration. And it stated very clearly early on that the authorship, the author of ideas, is not extended to non-humans. So that includes machines, including aliens, but machines in particular. So in the clearest example, if you just type in a prompt and then the AI generates a full written product, a visual work, a musical work, or code in response to your prompt, then none of that is copyrightable. The traditional elements of authorship have been carried out by the AI, not by you. So it's carried out by a non-human. Therefore, it cannot be protected by copyright. And recently, the federal courts affirmed this position, that AI-created artwork cannot be copyrighted. So yet another reason to be the strong human in the loop. If you want to create something completely and you don't need to copyright it, you don't need to turn it in, you want to create it for other purposes, great. But know that both in terms of copyright, in terms of your own personal ethics, those are the things you need to be concerned of with as you are using AIs to generate. So what questions do you have so far about, I'm not a copyright lawyer, but about this idea and about the contribution of AI versus others? Feel free to put this in the chat. All right. And I want to touch on one final thing in our last few minutes, and that is security and data privacy. So I am over here and I am using, let me go ahead and share my screen again. I want to do some work. And so I go over here and I start my new chat here. And I'm going to go on GPT-4, and there's an amazing tool here called Advanced Data Analytics. Previously, this was called Code Interpreter. Neither of those are really good names. I think of this as like a meta tool. What this does is it enables the model to write new tools for you as you need them. You want to do a visualization? You want to upload data, do a visualization on it? It will write the code to upload the data and then write the code to do the visualization based on the information that you give it. It's amazing. So what happens when I turn on advanced data analysis is I get a plus here. And what this plus means, I can upload a file. So for example, if I want to get an idea of the breakdown of the people in my class, I'm interested in grades according to people's majors, their minors, what year they are in school. and I want to sort of get an idea of the grade breakdown by that. All I have to do is drag and drop my students and their grades and their information right there, right here. Just drag and drop. It's easy to do. Did anyone's alarm bells go off? Does anyone have any concerns? I have your grades right now. I have your grades. And most of you did great. A few of you, I'm sorry, you did not do great. I'm going to take your grades and I'm going to upload it here. Is that okay? Carol says extreme FERPA violation. Yes. Grotesque, horrible. Why? Because this is not running on my machine. This is running on OpenAI servers. And OpenAI is absolutely likely to train on your data. So, Jesse Spencer Smith, you have a D in the class. I've been busy. You have a D in the class. And that information is going to be shared with OpenAI, and they're going to train on it. And it's entirely possible for that information to get out, either through the model, through the exposure, or because they store everything, and maybe they get hacked, or the information leaks. But even if everything goes perfectly according to plan, the model has learned that I made a D in Intro to Generative AI. That's terrible for a chief data scientist at the Data Science Institute to have a D. And it's going to be out there because the model learned it and could share with others. Extreme FERPA violation. So we can upload, but we absolutely have to keep in mind what we're uploading. And keep in mind, it's not enough to just anonymize data. Data can very easily be de-anonymized. As a matter of fact, that's something that ChatGPT and advanced data analysis would be really good at, figuring out who you're really talking about and tie it together to that information as well. So there's a pathway to really get information which is highly sensitive and to easily upload it. All we have to do is drag and drop, which means you never drag and drop. For any information that you think might be sensitive, instead what you can do is ask the model, I would like to generate synthetic data. Here are the headers. Here's properties of the data. Make a class of 30 students. You can give all the information that you want. It will generate the data for you, allow you to download it. Now you can experiment to your heart's content and generate all the code that you need to. Then what you do is you bring that code local and you run any of that sensitive information locally. So it's not shared anyway. So there's a way to use these models, but part of it is to never, ever actually upload any sensitive information. So we're pretty much at the end of our time, but I wanted to share two additional things for resources for you. We've talked a lot about sort of how to do or what to do, what not to do, but that's a whirlwind tour, right? You probably still have a lot of questions about what can you do with AI. So I hope that you'll join us for our other workshops. The information is right here. You can just go to bit.ly DSI workshops, capital DSI dash workshops, or you can do a quick scan of here. We'll also send out some emails as well. So in addition, if you want to find out all the things that are happening at the DSI, you can go to DSI newsletter. We will have an AI intensive, we call it AI Winter. It's meant to be funny. AI Winter intensive training. It's going to be over about 4 days. It'll be early January, where you can get to the skinny on a lot of these details. So if you want to learn how to train a model, really use a model, take that workshop. And in May, we have a 4-week intensive. But even before all that, we have a number of workshops going on. But if you want to find out all that's happening at the DSI, sign up for our newsletter. And do join us for the other workshops. Thank you very much for joining. I hope this serves as a guide as you begin to explore an amazing new world of generative AI. Thanks. See you around.